I never thought I'd be sharing a bed with my best friend after what happened that night. But there we were, two grown men, one tiny twin bed, and enough tension between us to set the sheets on fire. It all started with a simple favor. "Hey, can I crash at your place for a few days?" Liam asked, standing in the doorway of my apartment with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I blinked at him, surprised. "Of course. You okay?" He shrugged like it was nothing, but the tightness in his jaw said otherwise. "Just shit going down at my place. I'll explain later." Liam and I had been best friends since freshman year of college. Now, at 27, we were still tight enough to crash on each other's couches and share too many beers when life got too heavy. But something about the way he looked that day, the weariness in his eyes, made me worry. Not that he let me dig too deep, that wasn't his style. He settled in like he'd lived here forever, took over the couch, commandeered half the fridge, and fell right back into our old rhythms like no time had passed. Only this time something felt different. Maybe it was how quiet he was when I caught him staring, or how he laughed at all the right moments but his eyes never quite joined in. Or maybe it was just me, projecting something I'd long buried. Because truth be told, I'd always had a thing for Liam. I just figured he'd never feel the same. 3 days in, my small apartment started feeling smaller. The nights got a little weirder. There were moments, just tiny ones, where his fingers brushed mine too slowly, where his gaze lingered too long when I changed shirts, where his silence felt charged instead of comfortable. I told myself not to overthink it. We were friends. Just friends. And besides, Liam was straight. Always had been. Or at least, that's what I thought. Then came that stormy Friday night. The power went out. Just as we were midway through watching some dumb horror flick, the room plunged into darkness, lit only by the soft flicker of candles I'd scrounged from the kitchen drawer. "Looks like we're going full caveman tonight," I joked. Liam chuckled, low and tired. "Got any more blankets? That couch is freezing." "Dude, just take the bed. I'll crash on the couch," I said, already getting up. But he caught my wrist. "No, just fuck it. Let's both crash in the bed." It's not like we haven't done that before. We hadn't. Not since college. Not since that one night after too many drinks when we passed out side by side at a friend's place, and I laid there pretending to sleep while he snored inches from me. I hesitated, but he was already pulling off his hoodie and walking into my bedroom like it was nothing, so I followed. Of course I did. It was awkward at first. The bed was too small. His knee kept knocking into mine. My arm was trapped between us, and every time I shifted, I accidentally brushed against his side. But we didn't say anything. Just laid there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hammer the windows. Then, somewhere between midnight and morning, I woke up to his hand resting on my hip. Just resting there. Not moving, not grabbing. Just there. My heart thudded hard in my chest. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. Because part of me, some scared, hopeful, reckless part, didn't want him to take it away. I lay there frozen, every nerve in my body lit up like a Christmas tree. Liam's hand stayed on my hip, steady, not gripping, but definitely intentional. I tried to convince myself it was an accident, that he was still asleep, that his arm had just fallen there, but I could feel the warmth of his palm through the thin fabric of my sweatpants, the quiet certainty of that contact. He wasn't asleep. I knew Liam's sleep patterns better than my own. When he was out, he was dead to the world. This wasn't that. His breathing had shifted. Slower, more deliberate, measured. Still, I didn't move. And neither did he. Minutes passed. Maybe hours, maybe just seconds. And then I felt it. His thumb moved. Just a tiny graze. A slow drag along my hip bone that made my breath catch in my throat. That was the moment I stopped pretending. "You awake?" I whispered, not daring to look at him. A pause. Then, softly, "Yeah." Silence again. The kind that wraps around your chest and won't let go. "You good?" I asked, trying to sound casual, as if this was something normal, something we could just brush off like crumbs on a table. Liam shifted behind me. The bed creaked slightly, and his hand slipped away. "Sorry," he said, voice low, like it hurt to say it. "No." I turned over to face him, suddenly needing to see his expression. "Don't be," The room was dim, only faint light seeping in from the street lamps outside, enough to catch the outline of his face, those sharp cheekbones, the mess of curls falling over his forehead. His eyes were wide, searching mine, uncertain. We just stared at each other for a beat too long. "What was that?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He let out a soft breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know, man. Damn, I don't know what I'm doing." I could have said a lot in that moment. That it was okay. That I understood. That I'd been thinking about him in ways I shouldn't for years. But instead, I said the dumbest thing possible. "You drunk?" He actually smiled at that, just a little. "No, not even close." We laid there for a moment, both of us staring at the ceiling now, like the answers were written up there. "I didn't plan it," he said quietly. I couldn't sleep. And then you were right there, and I don't know, I wanted to touch you." My heart did something I couldn't name. Have you ever? I didn't finish the question. I didn't have to. He shook his head. "No, never. Not until recently." And just like that, the room felt smaller, warmer, charged. "What changed?" I asked. He turned toward me again, closer now, his voice just above a whisper. "You." It hit me like a wave. Too fast, too much. And maybe it was the years of friendship, or the endless nights we'd spent side by side never crossing the line, or the way he was looking at me right now, equal parts scared and sure, but I didn't overthink it this time. I leaned in, just slightly. He met me halfway. The kiss wasn't dramatic, it wasn't explosive, it was tentative, careful, soft, the kind of kiss that asks a question instead of making a statement, and I answered it, wordlessly. We pulled back just an inch, our foreheads touching. "You sure?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. "No," he said, breathless, "but I want to be." And that was enough for now. We didn't say much after that, not that night. Liam rolled onto his back, his arm brushing mine again, but now it didn't feel accidental. It felt deliberate. We laid there in the dark, both of us staring up, not touching anymore, but also not moving apart. It was like we'd both just crossed a line we didn't know we were walking, and neither of us was ready to look back. I couldn't sleep. My heart was racing, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw the look on his face right before he kissed me. That flicker of fear mixed with something so painfully genuine, it made my chest hurt. He'd said I changed things, but maybe it was always there, waiting between the silences. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight hitting my face and an empty bed. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it all, that maybe the whole thing had been a dream born out of too many late nights and a stormy night's sleep. But then I heard the soft clatter of a mug in the kitchen. Liam. I got up, still groggy, and padded down the hallway. He was at the stove, back to me, wearing one of my old t-shirts that hung slightly off his shoulder. "Morning," I said, testing the waters. He turned slowly, mug in hand. "Hey." There was a pause, longer than it needed to be. "Sleep okay?" I asked, pretending to be casual as I grabbed a glass from the cabinet. He shrugged, offering a tight smile. "Yeah. You?" I nodded, sipping water like my life depended on it. "Yeah." We both stood there in the soft morning quiet, surrounded by the smell of coffee and eggs and something else I couldn't name. "You regretting it?" I finally asked. His brow furrowed. "No. Are you?" "No," I said quickly. Too quickly. "Just wondering where your head's at." Liam leaned against the counter, his mug cradled in his hands. "I don't really know, to be honest. I've never done anything like that before." "Yeah," I said, offering a half smile. "You mentioned." He looked up at me then, and something shifted in his expression. Less guarded, more raw. "I liked it," he said quietly. That stopped me cold. I hadn't expected him to say it out loud. "Not yet." "Oh," he chuckled, shaking his head. "You gonna make me say it twice?" "No, I set the glass down, trying to keep my voice steady. I liked it too." We stood there a moment longer, the air thick again but for a different reason. This wasn't about confusion or hesitation anymore. It was about what came next. "So," I said, awkwardly scratching the back of my neck, "does this mean we're going to pretend nothing happened? Or are we actually talking about this?" Liam exhaled, long and slow. "I don't want to pretend. I'm just scared as hell to talk about it." "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "Me too." He pushed away from the counter and walked over, stopping a foot from me. "But I don't want to ignore it either." I nodded. "Okay." Another pause. "Want to sit?" he asked, jerking his head toward the couch. We did, and for the next hour, we talked. Not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. He told me how he'd been feeling weird for months. Confused, pulled toward something he didn't have words for. That maybe he'd buried it under jokes and girls and too many beers, but it hadn't gone away. And lately, especially since he'd moved in, he couldn't stop thinking about me, about us. I listened, and I told him the truth, that I'd thought about him for years, but never let it slip because I assumed it wasn't even on the table. By the end of it, we were sitting close, knees touching, his hand resting between us like an invitation. "So," I said, "what now?" Liam looked down at our hands, then back at me. "I stay, if that's okay." I didn't say anything. I just laced my fingers through his and nodded. Yeah, it was more than okay. The next couple of days felt like walking a tightrope. Not because anything was wrong, but because everything was so new. We didn't label anything. There was no talk of what we were, or what this meant, or what the hell we'd call it if someone asked. We were just us. Only now there were quiet glances that lasted longer than they used to, soft touches on the arm. Liam brushing my back when he passed me in the kitchen, his laugh lingering in the air like it carried a different kind of weight now. And the bed situation? Yeah, we didn't even try pretending anymore. It wasn't like we were doing anything wild. It was more like gravity. We ended up in bed, in the dark, with the city humming outside, and his arms slung loosely over my waist. It felt easy in a way nothing else ever had, like all the noise of the world shut off when he pulled me closer. The third night, we kissed again, slower this time. No rush, no tension, no storm outside. Just two people figuring each other out in the quiet. Afterward, Liam laid there next to me, fingers idly tracing circles on my chest. "Do you ever think about how weird this should feel?" he murmured. I turned my head. "Weird how?" "I mean, we've been best friends for nearly a decade, and now I'm in your bed, kissing you like it's the most normal thing in the world." "Isn't it?" I asked, half smiling. He looked at me, eyes soft in the dark. "Yeah, that's the weird part." I laughed quietly, brushing hair off his forehead. "Well, I've had feelings for you since sophomore year, so you're late, but I'll take it." His eyebrows rose. "Seriously?" "Dead serious." He shook his head, grinning. "Man, I feel like an idiot. I never saw it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it." Probably both. We fell into silence again, but this time it was warm, comfortable, until he whispered, "What if this ruins everything?" I knew what he meant. The weight of that thought had been hovering in the back of my mind too. If we messed this up, it wouldn't just be a breakup. It would be losing my best friend, losing the one person who'd always been constant. It might, I said honestly, but it might not, and I think it's worth finding out. Liam nodded slowly, then tucked his face into my neck. "You always say the right thing." "That's because I'm smarter than you," I whispered into his hair. He groaned and smacked my chest. "Asshole." "Still smarter," I teased. But underneath the jokes, the playful banter, was something heavier, something real. The next morning, he stayed in bed longer than usual. We didn't talk much, just existed in the same space like we'd done for years. Except now there was this undercurrent of something tender running between us. Later, as I made breakfast, he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I froze for half a second, because public affection, even in the privacy of my kitchen, was a leap. But he didn't let go. And I didn't pull away. "We should do something today," he mumbled into my shoulder. "Like what?" "Something normal. Something we always used to do, just us." I turned to face him. "You mean?" Like, go to that old record store we used to waste Saturdays at? He grinned. Exactly. So we did. We went out, walked around like we always had, picked through vinyl, joked about each other's terrible music taste, argued over the superiority of 80s synth pop versus early 2000s emo. But now there was a new layer to it all, his hand brushing mine when he thought no one was looking. The way our eyes caught and lingered just a second too long. That moment when he reached for an old album I loved and said, "Remember this? You used to play it every time you were sad." And I realized he'd noticed things I never thought he did. We ended the day on a rooftop we used to sneak onto in college. Just sitting, beer bottles between our knees, legs dangling over the edge. "I used to come up here after you'd go to sleep," Liam admitted. "Why?" He shrugged. "To think, to breathe. It was the only place that felt quiet." I looked over at him. "Still feel quiet?" He met my gaze, then nodded. "Yeah, but for the first time, it doesn't feel lonely." That hit me square in the chest. And in that moment, I realized we weren't just experimenting. We weren't just friends crossing a line out of boredom or confusion. This was something. Something real. After that rooftop night, things shifted again, but not in a bad way. If anything, we started to feel more like ourselves than ever. Just more honest. Like all the things we'd been too scared to say over the years were finally allowed to exist in the space between us. Liam didn't move out. He kept saying, "Just a few more days." But those days stacked up until his duffel bag was unpacked and his toothbrush sat next to mine like it belonged there. And honestly, it kind of did. We didn't have a talk about it, no declarations, no "so what are we now" conversation. We just let it happen. Slow, quiet, real. But not everything was perfect. About a week after the rooftop, we went out to grab dinner. Just a hole-in-the-wall pizza joint we used to hit up back in college. The same lady still worked the counter, and she remembered us, even called us her boys. We grabbed a booth in the corner, like always. Liam slid in across from me, and for the first time, I noticed how he hesitated. Like he wasn't sure how to act in public. Whether this us was still just between us. And I got it. We hadn't told anyone, no friends, no family, not even the guys in our old group chat. We weren't hiding, not exactly, but we weren't broadcasting either. And for someone like Liam, who'd never questioned anything about his identity before, I knew that weight had to feel a little heavier. Halfway through our slices, he went quiet. "You good?" I asked, wiping sauce from my fingers. He nodded, but his smile was tight. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" He glanced around, then leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Do you think people know?" I blinked. "Know what?" "About us." "I mean, it's probably obvious, right?" I shrugged. "We're sitting across from each other eating pizza." "Doesn't scream couple," he exhaled, fidgeting with his napkin. "I don't know, I just feel like everyone's looking at me different lately. Like they know I've changed or something." I leaned back, studying him. "Do you feel like you've changed?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, but not in a bad way." "Then what's the problem?" He gave me a look, one that said I wouldn't understand even if I wanted to. And maybe I didn't. I'd known I was into guys since high school. I'd gone through the internal panic, the coming out, the confusion. Liam hadn't. This was all new for him. And while I was busy enjoying the closeness, the kisses, the quiet domestic mornings, he was still playing mental catch-up. Later that night, back at the apartment, he paced the kitchen while I leaned against the doorframe. "You ever feel like you're one version of yourself with certain people and someone completely different with others?" he asked. "All the time," I said. "But I think that's just part of figuring out who you are." He stopped, finally looking at me. "And what if you don't like the version you used to be?" I walked over, placing a hand on his chest. "Then maybe that version was never really you." He looked down at my hand, then covered it with his. "I don't want to mess this up." "You won't." He nodded slowly. "Then can we keep this just between us for now? Not because I'm ashamed, just I need more time." I didn't even hesitate. "Liam, we're not on anyone else's timeline." He pulled me into a hug after that, One of those full-body, arms tied around you kind of hugs that says more than any words ever could. We stayed like that until the kettle whistled behind us. The next few weeks were quieter. No big talks, just small moments. Coffee in the mornings. His hoodie thrown over the chair. My playlists bleeding into his. Movie nights that turned into half-asleep cuddles on the couch. But the weight of what we were becoming was still there, humming in the background. Then, one night, it all came to a head. It was a Thursday. I remember that because I was working late and Liam texted me something totally normal. Liam, "Hey, what time you coming home?" Me, "9-ish, you good?" Liam, "Yeah." But when I walked through the door, he wasn't okay. He was sitting on the floor in the living room, back against the couch, eyes glassy. "Liam?" I dropped my bag and went straight to him. "What happened?" He didn't answer at first, just shook his head and wiped his face with the sleeve of his sweatshirt. "I talked to my mom today," he finally said. "Okay," I told her. "About you. About us." My breath caught. "Wait, what?" She asked if I was seeing anyone, and I didn't lie. I told her it was a guy, that it was you. I sat down next to him. "And?" He let out a shaky breath. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said, okay, yeah, he said, finally smiling. "Okay," I laughed, more out of shock than anything. That's good, right?" He nodded, eyes still a little wet. "Yeah, it's really freaking good." And right there, in the middle of the living room, we kissed again. Not the hesitant kind, not the kind that asks questions, the kind that knows the answer. That kiss felt different, not just because it happened in the middle of the living room, not just because he'd told his mom, but because for the first time, Liam wasn't holding anything back. No second guessing, no hesitation in his eyes. It was like something in him had finally clicked into place. And it made something in me loosen too, something I didn't realize I'd been keeping tight this whole time. We sat on the floor afterward, limbs tangled, his head resting on my shoulder while the city moved outside our window like it always did. The noise, the traffic, the blinking red light from the corner bodega sign, it all felt 1,000 miles away. "You know," he murmured, "I didn't expect it to feel like this." Like what? Right? That word did something to me. I kissed the top of his head and just let us sit there, quiet, steady, no need to explain anything. The next morning, everything felt normal. Like we'd reached some invisible threshold and passed it. Not a milestone, not a turning point, just something real, finally grounded. Liam was cooking eggs shirtless, because of course he was, and humming some off-key song from a playlist he used to make fun of me for. I came up behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist, and kissed the back of his neck. He leaned back into me without missing a beat. "You're clingy in the mornings." "Yup," I said, not letting go. "Get used to it." He chuckled, flipping the eggs like he'd done it 1,000 times before. I could. A few hours later, we were both out running errands, walking side by side down a crowded sidewalk. At one point, our hands brushed, and without thinking, I laced my fingers through his. And he didn't pull away. He looked down, smiled, and held on. That moment stayed with me for days. Because it was public. It was simple. And it was brave in a way that neither of us acknowledged out loud. Later that week, we met up with our friend group, something we hadn't done since everything started. The whole crew was there. Marcus with his loud laugh, Devin with his permanent resting smirk, and Olivia, who clocked Liam's hand on my lower back within 10 seconds of us walking in. She didn't say anything, just raised her eyebrows, smirked, and gave me a nod like, finally. Halfway through the night, Marcus asked how living together was going. Liam glanced at me and said, "Honestly, it's kind of the best thing that ever happened to me." There was a beat of silence. Devin raised an eyebrow. Olivia just grinned. "You guys are dating, huh?" she said casually, taking a sip of her drink. Liam's hand tightened on mine under the table. I met his eyes, ready to let him take the lead. If he wanted to lie, dodge, change the subject, I'd follow his lead. But he didn't. He nodded. Yeah, we are. And just like that, it was out. Nobody made it weird. Nobody pushed for details. The conversation shifted after a few jokes, mostly aimed at how long it took us to get there. And that was it. Easy. Laughed off like it was always going to happen anyway. On the way home that night, Liam slid into the passenger seat, his face flushed from the drinks and the attention. That wasn't so bad, he said. Wasn't bad at all. I think I was waiting for some dramatic moment, like someone freaking out or making it weird. Instead, Olivia called it months ago. He laughed, tipping his head back. God, we're obvious, huh? Painfully, when we got home, he stood in the doorway of my bedroom, watching me undress. I never thought I'd be the guy doing this, he said, voice low. I paused. Doing what? This. Coming home to you, sleeping in your bed, waking up next to you, calling you mine. I crossed the room and pulled him in by the shirt. Well, you are. Yeah, he whispered, his mouth brushing mine. I am. We didn't do much talking after that, and that night, with him curled up next to me, his arm draped over my chest like it belonged there, I realized we were done figuring things out. We weren't in the maybe phase anymore. This, whatever we were building, was starting to feel permanent. A few months passed, and with them came all the small changes that build a real life together. We learned each other's weird habits in full detail, like how Liam needed 2 alarms to wake up, but still never got out of bed until I literally dragged him. Or how I could never remember where I put my keys and he always found them in the freezer, for some reason. We argued over dumb stuff, like whose turn it was to buy paper towels or who left the dishes in the sink. But even those arguments ended with a kiss, or a quiet laugh, or Liam pushing me up against the counter and saying, "You're lucky you're cute." We weren't perfect, but we were good. Really good. There was one night, late in the fall, where we were both on the couch under a shared blanket, watching some awful reality show. Liam was half asleep, his head on my shoulder when he said it. I think I'm in love with you. Just like that. No big build-up, no nervous pacing. Just the words, honest and quiet. My stomach flipped, and I looked down at him. You think? He smirked against my shirt. Okay, fine, I know. I didn't say anything for a second, just wrapped my arm around him tighter. Good, I said, because I've been in love with you since that time you fell asleep on my shoulder during that train ride back from Boston, sophomore year. He blinked up at me. Wait, seriously? Yup. You mean I could have had you years ago? I grinned. You weren't ready. Neither was I, probably. He kissed me, then muttered, You're mine now. The holidays came, and for the first time in forever, we did them together. We went to his mom's place and then to mine. I watched Liam make awkward conversation with my aunt over mashed potatoes, and he watched me try not to die when his grandma asked if we were roommates or something else. Something else, yeah. It felt good to say it out loud, and maybe the best part of all, that feeling I used to get when I thought about the future, that tight, uncertain kind of anxiety, it was gone, replaced by something softer, something like calm. We weren't rushing to label everything. We weren't planning weddings or moving across the country. We were just showing up for each other. Every day. In the little ways that mattered. The first time Liam said, I'm home, when he walked through the door after work, I felt it. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't an experiment. This was home. One night, not long after the new year, we were sitting on the fire escape with beers in hand, watching the city do its thing. He nudged me. You ever think about how close we were to never figuring this out? All the time, I said. Crazy. Yeah, I said, bumping his shoulder. But we're here now. Liam looked over at me, his eyes soft and steady. Yeah, he echoed. We are.